Welcome back to Mind Games, the show that bends reality just enough to make you question everything. This is episode 7, New Year's Eve. For Alex, it was just another Tuesday, another chance to promise himself things he knew he'd forget by February. He scribbled 3 resolutions onto a crisp yellow notepad. Eat healthier, read more books, call Mum more often. Simple, achievable. He left the pad on his coffee table, the pen resting beside it, and went to bed just before the countdown. As the world celebrated the stroke of midnight, the ink on his notepad began to bleed, to shift, to rewrite itself. The next morning, the smell of fresh coffee filled his small apartment. Alex sat on the couch, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, and glanced at his resolutions. But they weren't his resolutions anymore. The neat, familiar cursive had been replaced by a jagged, urgent script. It read, "Stop ignoring the signs." Below that, "Let me in." And finally, a chilling third line, "You know who I am." His heart hammered against his ribs. The pen, which he'd distinctly remembered capping, was now open, its tip still wet with ink, lying a few inches from the pad. He told himself it was a prank, a very elaborate, very unfunny prank by a friend with a spare key. He had no such friends the next day. The list was different again. "You're not alone in this house." Alex spent the afternoon checking every lock, peering into every closet, his skin crawling with the feeling of being watched. He was a rational man. There had to be an explanation. Carbon monoxide leak, a mild psychotic break brought on by holiday stress. He even laughed at the absurdity of it, a hollow, nervous sound that echoed in the silent apartment. The following morning the message was just 2 words. "I've been patient." That's when the real fear took hold. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't in his head. Something was communicating with him. Something that had access to his home, to his most private space. He grabbed the notepad, his hands shaking, and tore it to shreds. He ripped each page into tiny, confetti-like pieces, stuffed them into a garbage bag, and threw it in the dumpster outside, watching the truck haul it away with a sense of finality. Phew. He returned to his apartment, breathing a sigh of relief. On his coffee table, pristine and whole, sat the yellow notepad. A single word was written on the top page. Tonight. He decided he wouldn't run. He couldn't. Where would he go? He spent the day in a daze. The word tonight burned into his mind. As evening fell, he found himself staring at the notepad again. He had to know. He had to see it happen. Another message was already there, a final, ominous sentence that felt more like a prophecy than a threat. "You can't start a new year without ending the old you." The words were a cold knot in his stomach. The old him. What did that even mean? He felt a strange sense of resignation. The game was reaching its end, and he was a player, whether he liked it or not. He decided to stay awake, armed with nothing but a lukewarm cup of coffee and sheer, terrified determination. He sat on the floor, his eyes fixed on the notepad as the clock on the wall ticked closer to midnight. 11:58. His breath hitched. 11:59. The silence in the room was deafening, a heavy blanket of anticipation. Then the clock struck 12. He watched, mesmerized, as the pen lifted, impossibly, into the air. It hovered over the page, and with deliberate, spidery strokes, fresh ink formed 2 words. "Turn round." Every instinct screamed at him not to, but he couldn't resist. His body moved on its own, slow and robotic. He turned, and his world shattered. Standing behind him, bathed in the soft glow of the streetlights filtering through the window, was a perfect copy of himself. Not a reflection, not a trick of the light. A living, breathing man, wearing his clothes, with his face, his eyes. The only difference was the smile. It was a cold, confident smirk that Alex had never worn in his life. The figure tilted its head, the smile widening. "I've been writing your resolutions," it said, its voice a perfect mimicry of his own. "Now it's time to keep them." In that instant, the lights in the apartment flickered violently, plunging the room into strobing chaos of light and shadow. Alex squeezed his eyes shut against the disorienting flashes. A strange, weightless sensation washed over him, a feeling of being pulled apart and put back together. It lasted only a second, but it felt like an eternity. When the lights steadied, the room was still, the air was calm, and there was only one Alex standing by the coffee table. He looked down at his hands, then at the notepad on the table. He smoothed his shirt, a faint, unfamiliar smile touching his lips. He picked up the pen, clicked it shut, and placed it neatly beside the pad. A new year had begun, and one of them was ready to make a fresh start. Thanks for watching this episode of Mind Games. Which one do you think survived? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for a new reality-bending mystery.